All systems are go.
Roger that, Control. We will go for console launch.
Roger that, VCS. Power supply is plugged in. Cartridge port is open.
VCS is now at full distribution and great sales anticipated ahead. Control, we have a problem. There's a dip in sales. In television and ColecoVision, catching up fast. We can't keep up with them. We're losing them. We're losing them!
The Atari VCS video game console, past its prime. Atarians, we can rebuild it. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first personal arcade machine. The 5200 will be that machine. Better than the VCS. Better graphics, faster processor, stronger arcade game library.
Well, everyone in the retro gaming universe, welcome to the fourth episode of the Atari 5200 podcast. I am Captain Bob, one of your hosts, along with he who loves the Atari 5200 and many things retro, David, not to mention the man with the tools and the talent, Glen. On today's episode, we cover the game that changed the world, Star Raiders.
And for this episode, we have a very special guest. He's the founder of Atari Party. He is contributor to Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast, and most excellent co-host of the Atari XEGS Cart by Cart podcast. Bill Kendrick, come on down. You're the next guest host on the Atari 5200 podcast.
Yay, long time listener, first time caller. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk about one of the best games and one of my favorite games.
No problem. Thank you for coming on board the show here. Yeah, Let's take a look at the news. So, is there any new news within the Atari 5200 community or anything else? I know I got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we actually everybody wrote stuff. The only problem is Glen. He's on a non-Atari thing lately.
I am the black sheep. I admit it. I am.
Yeah, I kind of went on a tear lately. Pretty much on the advice of my ever awesome co-host David, I got a VCS adapter for my 5200 from Venezuela, and lo and behold, I plugged it into the 4-port that I have, and it works. So, as some of you guys know, that this was a demo model that somehow came into my possession. They basically repackaged this thing and sold it to Toys R Us, and then they sold it to me way back when. It also has like 2 data plates on the bottom of it, so there's like the sticker that was originally with it, and then the factory put another sticker on top of it. So it looks like that this is a factory-modified machine that's able to use the adapter. So a little bit more of the mystery of my machine has been solved.
Just so people know, if you have an asterisk on your serial number, you most likely have a machine that was modified to accept the adapter already.
Yeah, I did not. I didn't know that. In fact, hold on. If you give me 2 seconds here, we'll lift mine up and take a look.
You should see it. If there's an asterisk, look for an asterisk.
And I heard you got to be strong to do that, right? Lift those things up?
Yep. Yeah, oh yeah. Mine, believe it or not, does not have an asterisk.
Which could mean that the motherboard in there is not the original one that came with that particular Atari, or they simply mislabeled it.
Yeah, it really is. It's a kind of a mystery machine, and like I said, I posted it on Atari H under one of the threads, but it is heat stamped into the plastic. This is a demo model. Do not resell. Which
someone's getting fired over that.
Yeah, I'm sure they're over it by now, but but no, the adapter works on it, no problem. It is really cumbersome though. I mean, you put that sucker in there. I mean, it looks like the monolith from 2001 sitting on your coffee table. It's pretty outrageous. But I just want to mention that everything I've gotten from Venezuela has been nothing but mint, top quality stuff. And I personally have had no problems with it clearing customs or anything else. So it's been coming through. So on a non-5200 note, I do want to mention that I've been buying up Howard Scott Warshaw games for the 2600. I plan on going to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo again this year. Hopefully Mr. Warshaw will be there again. And if that is the case, I have a perfect Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And a Sharpie, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, he brings his own Sharpies.
Oh, okay.
He's prepared. He's and a great guy. Pretty good copy of E.T. And some, like I did mention here that I don't know what it is with E.T. I think it's just the popularity or just the kitsch value.
It's the dig dump movie, isn't it? It's that movie.
I don't know what it is, but I'm looking for I want a really nice copy. I'm figuring, I'll pay $20 for it. No, it's like $50, $75, and up. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I have a pretty good copy of E.T. And then, again, from our good friends down in Venezuela, I have a beautiful copy of Yar's Revenge. So I got my Yar's Revenge came, plastic wrapped and everything else. I don't like the plastic wrap. Some of the games I've gotten that are still new in sealed boxes, that shrink wrap continues to shrink over time, and it basically crushes the box. So one of the things I do pretty much as soon as I get them is I take them out of the plastic wrap and throw it away. It was kind of an afterthought. It was most likely for loss prevention, people pilfering games and stuff like that. So I just get rid of it. And also, just want to say very much a thank you to our good friends up in Maine. Gentleman up there sold. In fact, it was David who spotted this on the Atari Marketplace for Facebook, and I picked up a Atari 5200 case. So now I'm going to take the motherboard that I have. That it's an asterisk board. It will play with the it'll play nice with the adapter. And I'm going to put it in this nice pristine case, and then I'm going to figure out what to do with it, because originally I thought my machine doesn't do the adapter. Now it does, and I'm like, well, I kind of have this second thing here, so I'm going to probably use it to learn about the 5200 internally a little bit more. My soldering skills are getting better, so I'm just going to kind of put this thing together, and maybe I'll keep it, maybe I'll give it away, maybe I'll do something with it. I have no idea, but I'm just going to use it as a learning experience.
Well, I just wanted to say two things. One about the VCS adapter. They really should have made that adapter more horizontal than vertical, so it could lay flat on top of it. That would have been better, I believe, but as it is, it's so vertical. I agree with you. It looks like just looks like a huge tower on top of already a beautiful, huge system.
It sounds like it could get snapped in half too.
You could, it could possibly do that. You could bump into it or something, and you could probably damage both pieces of equipment. And then the thing is that when you put an Atari 2600 cartridge into the top of that thing, it's this giant tiered thing.
There's no elegance in the design of that adapter, and the 7800 adapter, which unfortunately didn't make it to the market, was designed in the exact same fashion, which was not the best. I have to admit that.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is I also, too, got Yar's Revenge from Venezuela, and that thing was minty mint, and it's just amazing the condition of that shrink-wrap box, considering it's 30-plus years old. So wherever it was well taken care of for the 30-plus years.
Yeah, it's the stuff from Venezuela is. I would love to know the history of how this stuff ended up down there, because it's not just one person who's dealing in it. It's quite a few, several people down in Venezuela dealing with old Atari equipment and software. And when it comes into the States, it's absolutely perfect. It's beautiful stuff. So I'd love to know if somehow, one of these trucks or something just kind of made its way down there, or if they just offloaded it overseas. I'd love to know the history of how all that stuff got down there.
I get a feeling that like in South America and like parts of Europe and stuff, that a lot of the Atari stuff came out a little bit later. Like the technology was a couple years behind, so maybe that's why it's a little bit fresher. I don't know. That is really weird. I keep seeing in these show notes, Venezuela. I'm like, what's going on here? Like,
yeah,
you guys have a dealer down there.
Yeah,
You might be right, though, because the technology that was already old here, down there, wasn't by the time it made it to the marketplace. So you might be onto something with that.
yeah, and you know what? Let's think of it this way. They went ahead and sent it all down there. They found a market. They sent it all down, and they thought, hot darn, this is going to work out great. And then right about the same time that that Atari was offloading all this stuff down there, they turned around and somebody came out with this Nintendo NES right about the same time. And so here's all this product down there. They were able to offload it. NES comes out. Everybody drops everything and goes for the NES. And that's why it just kind of sat on a shelf.
Let the name of NES be stricken from now till the end of time.
There you go.
I don't know. I like Mega Man. I'm sorry.
Well, we want to thank you for being on the show.
All right, I'll
take
talk to you
care.
later.
The exit right. Exit stage right. I did have an Atari 5200 project here, so I'm going to start off with that one. I made another paddle controller for David, this time without the gear shifter mod. And that's been shipped up to you, David, so you'll be able to do a couple of dual paddle games. It's really good. We tested it a couple times with Kaboom, and it felt really nice. As a matter of fact, my good friend Mary Parker preferred the one I'm sending you over my prototype ones. Oh, okay. She felt it felt much better. So hate to let it go, but it is definitely yours, and it's going to be on its way. Other projects I've just been working on, I've been, as you may know, on my retro channel, Glen's Retro Show, I do a lot of RetroPie conversions. I've completed my Dream Gear, which was a 201 Java game that's been converted to a Raspberry Pi with a 2.4-inch screen. I've just about finished my Pac-Man and Space Invaders from Basic Fun. I'm simply waiting for an external SD card adapter. I was trying to modify it and connect directly to the test points on the Pi, and it just couldn't get it to work. So I'm waiting for a part, and they'll be finished. My latest project has been an Excalibur Family Guy pinball that you guys released. This is Atari related. It's being converted into a missile command with a trackball and 2 joysticks, so we can also do Robotron and Crazy Climber on it. And that's got it's pretty neat. I mean, it's as usual in my brain. It's simpler than when you're doing it, but it's making progress. I'm simply waiting for a couple of buttons to come again from China. Takes forever, but when that's done, Missile Command, Centipede, Tempest, Crazy Climber, Robotron, Defender will all be set to go on this little unit here. Another thing I'm working on, I've been testing a couple of hardware parts for the Raspberry Pi, a Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and USB hub, which is working out pretty nice. Been fixing some old VFD games, testing some USB encoders to use in some future projects. And my good friend Charles Tweedy made a buzz-off kit for the Vectrex, and I'm actually in love with that thing right now. It makes the Vectrex much more enjoyable to play. Once all these projects are done, I do have plans to try and make a new 5200 controller, like an arcade stick. So that's definitely in my plans in the coming months.
Very cool.
I know you guys will like that one, and yes, I'll make you guys one, so don't worry. Your controls may be a little delayed if we play up against each other, but that won't be, don't worry about that. You'll be fine.
I just wanted to say, Glenn, that I do appreciate you making me another one of the Atari 5200 paddles. It'll be great. I can play 2-player games now with the paddle. Now, because I'll have 2. The first one I got from you as well. And the only other thing is, because you do so much retro stuff that is connected to systems I have purged from my collection, I keep feeling sorry for selling that stuff. So you're not helping me, Guy.
That's okay. Well, you're and back at you. I know you're trying to help me curb my addiction. It hasn't worked yet, but I still have like a bed, and Cole's got about half of his bed free of consoles. So I'm okay right now, but very soon there'll be no room to breathe in my house.
Episode of Hoarders. Here we go.
That's it. Gaming Hoarders, episode 1.
Okay.
Well, heck.
You laugh now, but I could see that show coming on.
Oh, hey.
Maybe I'll be the host of that. Maybe I should start that one up.
The host? What are you talking about? The host?
Bill,
You're going to be the first. You're going to be the first subject.
That's why it's deflection. If I'm hosting, I'm deflecting it away from me.
Oh, okay.
Bill, do you have anything going on?
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, David, yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, David.
No problem,
David,
no
do you have
problem.
anything going on?
Well, thanks to Dwayne Ringo of the Arcade USA Facebook page, I recently received one of his Atari 2600 minis. These are made of wood, handmade, and painted with custom vinyl graphics to look like a 6-switch Woody. He currently has a second batch of 6 with 2 left for sale. So basically what's inside is a Raspberry Pi 3B with a version of RetroPie. RetroPie allows you to emulate many systems and consoles, and of course, that includes the Atari VCS and the Atari 5200.
Does it have switches that work, like reset and select and stuff? That'd be awesome.
No, they're faux switches.
Oh, somebody's got, yeah, fix that. That'd be so cool.
I know, but...
I hear a challenge. I hear a challenge.
Yes, I've thrown down the gauntlet. No.
Well, I don't know if Dwayne is going to accept that challenge.
Well, now they shut down almost all the Radio Shacks and everything. It's harder to find those little micro switches.
Actually, you can still get them at Best Electronics.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
It's a plug, Best Electronics. Hook us up.
Yeah, there you go. There's the plug.
Also, my retro buddy, Atari Guy 1021, has come out with a new product in addition to the excellent Master Play clone that allows you to use the Sega Genesis controller to play Atari 5200 games. He now sells a replacement for the Wico keypad.
You pick a wacko wacko when it's a Wico.
Wow, I'm scoring at home like you've never scored. I'm wacko over Wico.
Pick a wacko wacko when it's a Wico.
You're as tough as the joysticks at the arcade. He's wacko over Wico.
Wico, the only authentic arcade joysticks. The most durable, the most accurate, the fastest controls money can buy.
I've been practicing. Yeah.
Wacko over Wico. You pick a wacko wacko when it's a Wico.
So this keypad replaces the rare and expensive Wico keypad and allows you to connect a Wico command controller directly into the keypad, doing away with the need of the Wico Y cable or the original Wico keypad. You can find these on eBay or directly contact on Atari Age. I will be personally getting one of these.
He makes some good stuff, and he's bringing my collection value down, but that's okay. He makes some really good stuff.
Yeah, I actually have the original Wico. I was able to score one of those keypads. It's really nice to play without that Y cable. That Y cable is kind of problematic.
But I do have to say something because I was using it today to play Star Raiders, and I can't say if it's the overlay that came with my brand new game from Venezuela or if it's the construction of the keypad itself. But it was really hard to get that overlay to stay put.
Yeah, the overlay is not designed for that Wico keypad, and that's one of the reasons why I play with the original. We'll get to this later in the podcast, but that's one of the reasons I use the original equipment instead of the Wico stuff, because you put the overlay on there, and it just every time you press the button. That button actually has some movement to it. Mm-hmm. The one, the membrane one on the original controller doesn't have that movement. So every time you press it, it goes popping off and flying all over the place and everything. So, yeah, I just keep with the original stuff.
But I will tell you, because I played with both the original controller and the Wico setup, I will tell you as time went on, I slowly started not requiring the overlay anymore. Because I just started to memorize the keys. I always knew that the asterisk key was to get into speed mode. I always knew that the hashtag was to get into control mode. And as time went on, I just stopped looking at the overlay and just started pressing buttons.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of my little tips to make this game work for you, which is to memorize that keypad. So you don't even need the overlay. You just start whipping away and blasting those Xylons.
Watch out, Star Raider. You're flying in the Atari galaxy. We play rough out here. Sure, you have an attack computer and photon torpedoes. Ooh, nice shot, Flyboy. But there's 40 of us, only one of you. Checking the map, Star Raider? We know where you are. Bye-bye, Star Raider.
Star Raiders, the home video game that's only from Atari, and only for systems from Atari.
Well, first off, I want to say thanks again. I'm happy to be on the show today. One of the first web pages I made back in the 1990s, so I think it's 21 years old now, was my, and that was when I was in college, it was my Star Raiders tribute page. And, you know, as I learned more about, like, the 2600 port and the ST port and the 5200 and the sequels and other stuff we're going to talk about, I'm realizing I probably need to revamp it a bit. But yeah, back then I'd go to the library, I'd use the scanner, I'd scan the manual to get all the little pictures, and then I basically retyped the entire manual into HTML because I had nothing better to do, I guess. Wow. But because I love the game so much. And I didn't learn about the game until a few years after I had my Atari. So I got my 1200 XL in '83, I want to say, and I think I first saw Star Raiders in probably junior high, so '87, '88, at a friend's house, and I'm like, wow, what's this game? So yeah, excited to be here and talk about it and learn a little bit more about it because you know, like I said, I'm not familiar with the 5200 version, and I'm curious to see, you know, what differences there are and how it plays differently and so forth. But in other news, just last night, as of recording, the Rescue on Fractalus episode of the XEGS Cart by Cart podcast that David and I are on with Michael G, just landed. So if you know about the game, you know you got to land on a planet. Anyway, crickets. No. Insert crickets. Anyway, so yeah,
I was multitasking. All these apps are stopping. They're just stopped working on my computer. So I had to like open up something else so I could bring up your tribute page on Sonic.net. And yeah, I looked through it. It's a wonderful page. It really is. It pays a wonderful tribute to this game.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to. There's been so much more. Like as more people got on the net, so much more information's come out. And you know, I was recording little tiny QuickTime videos. I can't remember if I did it off my real Atari on my friend's laptop or if there was an emulator that was suitable to record on. But I took some probably the earliest, you know, posted on the internet videos of little tiny postage stamp size videos of what Star Raiders play was like, you know, 10 seconds at a time or whatever. So way pre-YouTube. But anyway, so yeah, like I said, the Rescue on Fractalus episode of the Cart by Cart podcast came out, and that game's available for the 5200, if I recall correctly. Yes. And is kind of like the next level of what Star Raiders is, which is the first person 3D game where you fly around and shoot stuff, but it adds some more dimension to that game.
Bill, I just wanted
yes.
to say you didn't have to insert crickets. I was listening to you, and because you're such an awesome orator, I did not want to cut you off, so please don't think. I was jumping in my seat going, hey, I know that podcast. I know the XGG podcast. That's a podcast, I know.
No, I'm just saying crickets because that was a dumb joke.
That's okay.
Anyway, so keeping up with the Atari stuff next Saturday, as of this recording. So probably, I don't know if the show will be out by then or not. How fast you guys edit it? I know other podcasts sometimes take a while to get out, but over in Sacramento, I'm going to be showing off some Atari stuff at the Sacramento Indie Arcade event, which is put together by a game development organization in the area, and basically it's kind of an exposition of local independent video game developers. So we're talking like, you know, PC, iPhone, Android, stuff like that. But we're going to have a little corner with all our really old stuff, including hopefully a Blastroids that my friend Dan DeVriend is going to bring. And I'll have some 8-bits, and I think Dan's going to bring a 5200. Marlon Bates is going to come. He also is local, and he's probably going to bring some Jaguar and Lynx stuff as well. So we're going to have all sorts of crazy Atari stuff to show off to all these young kids.
Cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and then speaking of links, I almost probably missed out because I wasn't paying attention to my email, but I was able to sneak in and get an order in for the Lynx SD card cartridge. I guess it'd be micro SD. So for the Atari Lynx, basically lets you stick ROM images or homebrews or whatever on a little micro SD card and plug that into the cartridge port. Or do they call it a cartridge? I don't remember. The little flat thing you stick in the Lynx.
Yeah, still called a cartridge, and I got mine from him over at Retro HQ, and it's a really slick little device.
Yeah.
It's really well designed.
Yeah, I don't think it's coming from the UK all the way to California, so it's probably not going to arrive for next weekend, but if it does, that'll be pretty cool. Because one of my links is I got decked out with the McWill LCD mod and VGA out, so that's super, super nice looking and good for events where you might want to put it up on a big monitor for people to all see what's going on. So,
and everyone out there, you have a Lynx. It's well worth to put that McWill screen mod in there. I mean, it's a night and day thing.
Oh yeah.
I have 2 videos on my channel. One, how to install it in the Lynx Model 1. One, to install it in the Lynx Model 2. You can take your time. It'll go through, but the output is just amazing. And then, like I said, you can do VGA out as well. It's fantastic.
What I love about it is there's a mode if you hit the backlight button, which no longer turns the backlight on and off because like what's the point? Because it's all LED now and doesn't take barely any power. But it has a kind of a scanline mode where it adds little scan lines between the pixels to make it look more like the original LCD. So
what's kind of funny, mine, I got one of his first batch, so mine didn't have that feature. He actually optimized his BIOS a little bit more, and he was able to squeeze it in.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't feel like sending mine back out, so mine doesn't have that option, unfortunately.
And then finally, I did a little segment on one of the recent Antic Atari 8-bit computer podcasts. So over in episode 40, I was talking about how I got my Atari 8-bit 1200 XL up on the internet with plenty of help from my friend Marlon. I bought some gear from him, and I'm basically connecting to an 850 interface that you normally hook up to like a modem and a printer and stuff like that. And it's going to a little tiny device, a Lantronix device, that you hook up on serial on one end and Ethernet on the other, and then you dial into IP addresses. Basically, it's
awesome.
It's telnet, and you go ATDT and then IP address, and then it's like, and then from there I shoot off on my laptop, and I can browse the web, I can do Twitter, I can check my email, I can go on RC, awesome. I can go on RC and chat with people. I could probably go on RC and chat with people at work over Slack because there's a gateway for that. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and so and then what I had to do right after I set that up is I'm using Ice-T, which is the 80-column terminal emulator for the Atari that came out back in the 90s and was just kind of revamped in the past couple of years to add color ANSI support. So I had to give my 1200 XL back to Bob Woolley so I could hack on the video so that I have perfect chroma luma separate video hooked up to my Commodore monitor, so I can have really nice 80 column without any weird color artifacting, but then still have the kind of ANSI color effect and look at ANSI graphics. Basically, it's pretty funny.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So BBS, and again, 20 years later, it's pretty cool.
Very cool.
All right, and that's me, I think. Thanks, guys.
You got it.
No problem. And I love those Commodore monitors.
Yeah, the 1084 is awesome.
Yeah, I got a 1092, and I also had
nice.
I also had an AMDEC, and Bob looked at the two. He's like, no, hook up the 1092. 1902 for the Atari, because it's look at the dot pitch on that. I'm like, what? I can't. Uh-oh. Glen's getting the call.
Well, don't tell me there's another ColecoVision on sale.
There you go.
All right. So back to David, I guess.
Okay. If we won't be interrupted by any more eBay alerts.
Hey, man, I got an addiction. What do you want?
I know, but your adulterous addiction. You're not giving any loving to the 5200 enough. All right.
Well, if you were when you come and visit, you'll see all the consoles are all wrapped up in their blankets, but the 5200 is the only one that's out.
Okay.
That one's gets the electricity going through her.
Okay. Well, as an appropriate segue, I would like us to all take a moment for the 5200. This system should have came out in 1979, but instead it sacrificed its rightful place in history so that the Atari 400 and 800 8-bit computer line could be realized. And thanks to that, we have Star Raiders today. Okay, so that's
By the way, Bill, did you grow up out here on the West Coast as well?
Yep.
Okay, so you up here in Seattle, the phenomenon of Star Raiders was just amazing. I mean, Star Raiders, but Star Blazers was absolutely incredible. They actually rescheduled the show so it wouldn't interrupt the bus service picking up the kids from school because kids were they changed it because the kids were getting up too early. The parents were like, "Put this on later," so they put it on later, and kids wouldn't leave until the show ended, and they were missing the bus, so they had to put it back on earlier.
That's funny. I did watch Star Blazers as like a little kindergartner, first grader, and like now that I think about it, that was kind of a violent show, but.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally watched Star Blazers as a little kid. It's kind of amazing. I thought I was the only one that knew about it, but no, obviously.
No.
Hanging around nerds.
It was a good show. I watched it every single day, and something happened, and I missed the very last episode. Oh. And it took like 25 years for me to get a copy of it to finally see the ending of it. But I love that show. The spaceship Yamato.
Again? What is this now, in television?
Listen, man, I'm a popular guy, and I apologize. I can't get on Skype on my computer, so
your fidelity is very disheartening.
Listen, I'm a game collector, I'm a bachelor, and I'm good looking. I mean, it's going to happen.
What can you do?
Oh, they hear my son in the background? No, you're not.
Okay.
Well, I guess we'll get to it.
Yeah.
I guess this is it. This. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the big one. This is the one that pretty much changed everything. Here's our game for today. It's Star Raiders. Publisher was Atari. Year's 1982, and it's model number CX5205. This is the fifth game of the line and one of the first 10 released for the system. Genre, I kind of made this up because some people say it's a space shooter. Some people say it's strategic. This is, if you ask me, a strategic first-person space shooter. The developer was Doug Neubauer and Joe Copson. Legacy and the history of this game, and let's face it, this is the game that changed the gaming world, and honestly, just the computer world in general. From the concept of first-person shooters to simulation, this is second only to computer space in the Stanford University Video Game Historical Archive. This would, this might go on for a while. So, folks, those of you listening, this would probably be a good time to hit pause, grab a glass of wine or a cup of tea, some cheese and crackers, and relax while I go on about this game because I must do it justice. All of us here must do it justice, and this might take a little while. So, okay, let's get into this right here. So, the creation of Star Raiders. The game was created by the people who literally invented the gaming world that we live in now and were nothing short of the geniuses that were at Atari during the most active and influential years. Okay, so first gentleman up, this is going to be Doug Neubauer. He's one of the core people that was at Atari and partially responsible for their early success with tech development. He's credited with the original writing and creation of Star Raiders. He developed it while he was working on the Pokey chip at Atari, and he was inspired by the text-based game of Star Trek for the first generation of Apple computers. Being originally from Oregon, he had the chance to return to the Pacific Northwest for Hewlett-Packard and abandoned the game to return home. Atari realized the potential of this game and wanted it finished. To the best of everyone's knowledge, it was finished by Joe Copson, and Copson is also credited with the game as well, at least for the 5200. He certainly was responsible for the analog interface development for the 5200 version. Neubauer currently resides in the Portland, Oregon area and is still working within the web design and video production industry. I personally have reached out a few times for interviews and just to make contact with them, but I've received really any response whatsoever. So I kind of did a little bit more research on it. Doug is somewhat of a private guy, so I didn't want to become a bother. And with that, hey, my hat is off to anyone who can bag that interview. All I can say is that I will be listening to that one when it does happen.
You know, Joe DeCure, who also worked on the Atari and the Amiga, and I think the 2600, right? He's actually working on a book, kind of a platform book, that's going to be in between Racing the Beam on the 2600 and I think it was called The Future's Here, about the Amiga. He's going to do one about the Atari 8-bit, or he's in the process of doing one. And he's actually also been trying to reach out to Doug. So, yeah, Doug's pretty hard to get a hold of, apparently.
Yeah, he does not want to talk to anybody. So, yeah, and the thing is, Joe DeCure, he just lives right up the road from me. He lives, I think he lives in Issaquah, Washington. So, yeah, he's just basically up the road. I should reach out to him and see if I could talk to him about.
Yeah, he's active on Facebook, and he seems pretty personable. So I would if you want to, if you feel.
Yeah, why not?
If you feel like it, yeah. See if you want to get him talking about some of these awesome chips in these machines.
Yeah, I'd love to. I just need to understand how they work. So he goes, so how's this thing work, man? It's so cool. It's like, yeah, I work with the technology so well, but understanding it for me is like, oh yeah, I really got to kind of work at it. So.
You know what? I'm sure most of it applies to 5200. I would look at Dayray Atari. That came out from Atari Program Exchange. It was basically like their first publicly released kind of technical manual, and it explains a ton of concepts of how the 8-bit, you know, the chips that they designed specifically for the Atari, which are also in the 5200, how those work and what they can do. So,
I got it.
Yeah, you can find it online, I'm sure. So.
Oh, okay. Cool. I shall do that. Yeah, moving along. The second person that was really credited for this thing is Joe Copson, and he's credited with bringing Star Raiders to the 5200. He's known for his extensive work in Silicon Valley, including working at Atari and Apple as well, and being one of the original owners of an Apple I computer that was sold by the Byte store in the Bay Area. This same machine was just sold a few years ago at auction. And it brought in, I can't remember what the exact number was, but it was high six figures. It was, I think it was somewhere in like the $630,000 range. So, yeah, Joe had one of those. If you ever want to get a good book, I think it's called The First Apple. And there's a gentleman who talks about, it was his brother actually, Joe Copson's brother, talks about how he got that Apple for the first time and how he hooked it all up, and he was explaining how things worked and everything else, and that kind of goes into what he was, which was he was a self-made genius. His family and friends often talked about how even at an early age he seemed to have a mind that functioned on a completely other level. When I started doing my research, I was kind of excited to maybe get in touch with him. But sadly, Joe passed away in Palo Alto, California, back in 2003. He was only 52 years old, and looked like it was probably from a cancer that was most likely caused from his from exposure in his time serving in Vietnam. The next gentleman up is who's kind of tacitly linked to all this is Bruce Pullman. He was responsible for developing The Last Starfighter, which eventually became Star Raiders 2 for the Atari 8-bit line of computers. The game really isn't all that related to Star Raiders, and if you're curious, the prototype can be played on the 5200 with an Atari Max cartridge. I played it a few times. It looks cool, but it just has a very unfinished feel to it. The name change happened around 1984 when the movie and the game it was based on wasn't the blockbuster it was hoped to be, and Atari thought that a name change could help sales if they pinned the Star Raiders name onto it. And this was done about the same time that Atari was going through its financial collapse. The next gentleman, which actually is related to Star Raiders, is Eric Wilmunder, and he was developing the real sequel for Star Raiders. This incorporated some new features like navigating within star systems, and those of you who are uber geeks such as myself, the Sol system, our system here, is actually included into it, and you can land on the planets.
I can see my house from here.
Yeah, there you go. In fact, Doug Neubauer even talks about how he was inspired by Star Wars as well. He goes, I kind of wanted a trench scene where you had to go into a trench and had to maneuver into it. And I think that's kind of like where Rescue on Fractalus kind of takes over, because you do have to do some canyon flying in that game, if I remember correctly. If any of you want any more information on this one, I would highly suggest going to the Antic 8-Bit podcast and look up episode number 104 where Eric is interviewed in it. Eric, he explains how the AI functions on Star Raiders. So essentially, the accuracy of the enemies is tied to how you track them. You become your own worst enemy. So the AI is essentially you. So the more accurate you are, they're basically shooting down a pipe at you. So if you got them right in the crosshairs, well, guess what? You're right in their crosshairs as well, and they're going to be fighting. So the better you get at the game, the better the enemies get. It's a simple yet absolutely brilliant way to develop an AI to dogfight with this. So Eric also released the unfinished work for Star Raiders 2 for all of us to check out on this podcast. So check it out, look it up, and it's totally worth it. There's a great YouTube video that is associated with it, and just kind of see where things were going with it. So here's the best part. He had no idea that the management at Atari decided to use the last Starfighter game that was in development as Star Raiders 2 until after the fact, and he even thinks that Atari management forgot he was even developing this thing in the first place. So it just goes to show you just how fractured Atari became in the mid-'80s during their collapse.
I just wanted to say, if you go on YouTube and you look up Eric Wilmunder, you'll actually find, I believe, his YouTube channel with a video of Star Raiders 2.
Right, and it's a old traditional spelling of Eric. I think it's either Dutch or German or something along the lines of that. But Eric is spelled Aric, and then Wilmunder is Wilmunder.
One thing worth mentioning, about this is the fact that this was basically an unknown prototype. Like, nobody really knew that this thing was out here until just a little over a year ago, I think, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Eric didn't even want to release it because he was like, well, this is an unfinished thing. It doesn't, it's you can't. He goes, you can't really find the depth of where this game was going, but you can. He goes, I just didn't want to release it and have something half-baked and people would play it or people would play around with it and go, wow, this thing really sucked. And I think it was Kevin Sabatz who basically talked him into, no, go ahead and release it. I mean, just release it with the caveat. Because, in fact, he even says in it, he goes, I'd rather have this partially completed game out there for people to play around with than having lose it altogether.
Yeah, and it says here, I'm looking at the archive.org page about, or the entry basically for this, and it says kind of an update in January of 2016. The source code and original design document have been recovered and uploaded here as ATR files. I've also converted the design document and program notes to pretty formatted PDFs and uploaded them as well. So that means people who feel interested in hacking on it and improving it, like, there it is. There's a source. Have fun.
Actually, it's happening because if you go onto Atari Age, you'll find a thread, and I believe I downloaded the latest version of the actual game that has been worked on.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Okay, I got to catch up with that thread then. Too much fun stuff.
Oh, that's what's happening with us digging around and actually bringing this stuff to light, is just how much is really out there. And yeah, really the depth of it. In fact, I'll get to that here in just a second.
You can never have enough Atari.
You can never. Oh man, you talk about Atari. You're talking about this game kind of is one of the things that ushered in the computer age. It showed us what these things are capable of.
If you listen to Antic, every couple of interview episodes, you hear somebody saying, and then I saw Star Raiders, and I had to buy that 800 right then and there. It sold a lot of computers.
The thing is that was the Atari 8-bit killer app, probably one of the first killer apps.
And it's not like they planned it that way. It's just like he was dinking around, and he's like, "Wow, there's a game. Okay, let's sell this too." And then it was almost like viral in a sense. It was not something that like, we're going to have this computer and we're going to make the best game for it, and that's going to be what sells it. It's just like they made this computer. They kind of didn't know what they were doing. This game came out as well, and then people started snatching it up because of the game. So.
Well, all you just had to do is put it on a track mode, and that 3D star field just hypnotized everybody.
And it also came out at the right time. You had Star Wars that had come out. I can't remember if Battlestar Galactica was out before or after Star Raiders, but it was still fresh in mind, at least Star Wars. And to see something like that actually play was mind-boggling to people.
Yeah,
well, it was pretty close to it. I think 79, 80, somewhere.
Yeah,
around.
I added some notes later on. I forget what they're on the show notes, but basically, like, we've got the Xylons versus the Cylons, and they both have base stars, and yada yada yada. So there's definitely there was some inspiration and vague, barely legal name changing done.
Well, just to let you know, as people who know me, I'm a Battlestar Galactica 1978 fan. So, yes, the show came out in 1978.
Oh, perfect. Okay, right there. Let's see. Who's next on our hit parade here? Carla Meninsky. She did the 2600 version of Star Raiders, as well as Dodge 'em, Warlords, and Indy 500, one of the 2600's original launch titles.
And the only game to use the driving controllers.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
For like 30 or 40 years.
I'm a controller freak. I hate to say it. I bought Indy 500 just for those controllers because it's like I got to have the controllers. I got to have the complete set. So
the ice level is awesome. I always remembered the ice level and slipping around. Like as a kid, like I just had that vision. So it was on my to buy list for ages. And then I forget if I got one or if I bought one. But yeah, I now have Indy 500 and 2 driving controllers. And one of these days I'll program something to actually use them. or there's some homebrews for the 2600 that use them, but I want something on the 8-bit because I don't think there was ever anything on the 8-bit computer that used them.
No, but I got to take my hat off to Carla because the 2600 port, usually when you port something down, it gets really diluted. It's very true to the 8-bit versions. It's a really good version of Star Raiders.
It actually is. Except if you crank up the difficulty on it, I've tried it. It becomes. I mean, I am going to toot my own horn here for a second. When I knock the rust off of myself, I am great at Star Raiders for the 5200. But I have tried over and over and over again. I don't know what I'm missing on it, but the 2600 version of Star Raiders, I can't get a grasp on it. It's to me, I get about halfway through it, it just becomes unplayable.
I'm having a little bit of flashback. When I was a kid, I had a neighbor that had a lot of 2600 games, and an older kid, like a teenager, when I was like 7 or 8 or 9, and like late teen, like probably getting on to be early 20s kid, right? And we would go over every once in a while and play games or borrow games. And I think he had Star Raiders, and I think I played it, and I remember the controller vaguely, and then I guess I just kind of forgot about it and never thought about it for a few years until the computer version, and then I just kind of didn't connect the two, and now I'm finally going like, wait, I did play a Star Raiders before I knew what Star Raiders was in a sense. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a good game. I mean, I remember I had the 2600 version before I had the 5200 version, and that was just because I didn't have a 5200. You just you just go for what you can get your hands on, and that was my introduction to it. Was actually the 2600. Then when I got my 5200, boy, that was everything.
Let's go into deep space. Galactic map, Sector 11. Hyperspace. Sights in. Cylon warships, attack. Steady, stand by. Photons. Star Raiders, that's it. What a video game! Atari Star Raiders, only for systems from Atari.
Moving along here, we got the ever popular and ever great Rob Zadibble and his buddy Jerome Dumont. Looks like they did the Atari ST port of Star Raiders, which I have yet to still take a look at. But they did that in 1986 for the Atari Corporation. By that point, it was Atari Corp and Atari Games. Atari Games being the arcade version, the arcade side of things, Atari Corp being the home computer side of things. Rob did the 5200 port of Missile Command and the system BIOS for the 5200 itself. This is an interesting footnote to all of this. When you start researching this stuff, you run into some interesting discoveries, and it's nothing short of amazing how intertwined the computer world was in its infancy. Many of these individuals came to know each other through the Computer Homebrewing Club, that was in the San Francisco Bay Area. And many people that had worked at Atari went on to developing different technologies that we still use today. And many of them went on to other companies, including Apple. It's pretty much well known that Steve Jobs was employee number 40 at Atari. And I think that's where he met a few other people. Jerry Jessup, one of Atari's legendary engineers, said it best. Apple is where Atari would be today if Atari would have survived and stayed together.
People got to realize, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that Atari wasn't really so much a gaming company. It really was a technology company that made games.
Yeah. In fact, Nolan Bushnell will say that from one end down to the other. In fact, that's when Warner came in and bought it from him. And he's like, okay, well, this is a technology company that makes games. And Warner was just like, no. Games are just like records. We make records. We sell records. Games are the same thing. And and that's one of the reasons why things became so shaky was they didn't understand that it was technology-driven, not entertainment-driven.
Yeah, if you go to the Bay Area and you look around and you see all of the Google campuses, like they have multiple campuses, right? They've got the main campus, and then just like you can't go a couple blocks without there being another Google company. Or down in Cupertino and that area, Apple was just spread out super wide, which is probably why they're designing their UFO office circle thing.
Yeah.
To try to consolidate a little bit. But, Atari back then was the Google or the Apple of today of back then, right? Like now that Apple's kind of resurfaced with the popularity of the iPhone and the iPad and kind of brought back the computers and stuff. But yeah, like down then, back then, like there was just, you couldn't throw a stone in an Atari office either. So yeah, you have to kind of keep that in mind. Like it was pretty gigantic and spread out in terms of both like space and the things they were working on. So.
Yeah, it was, the place was incredible. All right.
Well, that was just part of its problem, but 20/20 hindsight.
Right. Well, you know what? It was a new world. Nobody really knew how do you run a computer company?
Yeah.
Nobody's ever run a computer company before. So, sadly, I think a lot of the success today with computers is due to the fact that you have this example to look to how not to run it.
Yeah. Well, if you play Antic Podcast Interview Bingo like I do, you're stamping the notch on there for it was the best job I ever had. That all the people who ever worked at Atari always say. They always say that best job they ever had, and I feel like, wow, you've had nothing but suck jobs for like the last 40 years, then, huh?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, you talk to Todd Fry, you talk to Rob Zadibel. You talk to Howard Scott Warshaw. They're like, it was the only place where they believed that people of their mindset, the way that their minds work and everything else, this was a place that actually embraced that kind of thing. It's like, we don't care how you do it. It's just the whole place, it wasn't, process-driven. It was result-driven. I don't care what you do. I need this game in 6 months. Sounds good. And the game would just appear in 6 months. It really was, it was a really cool place. You hear the stories. One of these days, maybe I'll find a job like that.
Unless it was E.T., and then it was 6 weeks.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to the description here. So, to my knowledge, and this is, it is what it is, but to my knowledge, this was the first ever first-person shooter. This game has a lot of firsts to it. The first simulated 3D Starfield, which was a mind-blower for its time. It's also a real-time game. That's one of the things that makes this thing so brilliant. There are no breaks, even when you switch to a different screen. So thank goodness for the pause button on this machine. And with the incredible analog input, this is a better game than the Atari 8-bit version, even though it's virtually the exact same game. There were 3 distinct enemy ships. There's the Xylon fighter, inspired by the TIE fighter from Star Wars.
I have you in my sights.
That's right. the Xylon cruiser, that pretty much looks like the Battlestar Galactica Cylon Raider. It actually acts a little bit differently. This thing only fires at you if you fire upon it.
What?
I've actually
learned something every day.
I've actually done it. And I was playing around with it before we all got on Skype here. But if that thing shows up and you don't fire, it will come at you and pull away, come at you, pull away. It will not fire a shot. But as soon as you fire at it, then it starts unloading on you. So both of those two are very similar in attack patterns and firepower. But the third one, here's the kicker. They're the Xylon-based stars. Again, it's kind of Battlestar Galactica inspired, but they can be deadly. They can only be destroyed at close range due to their shields, and they have no problem unloading a firestorm of photons at you. I got one where I just played it just a little while ago. I warped into a sector, and it was two of them at the same time. It did not end well. It got pretty ugly. It was like, I'm going to start this game over. So, all right. Now, yeah, here's where it gets good. You are the last hope for the galaxy. The Xylon fleet has launched a full-out attack upon us. The only thing standing in the way between them and the total domination of our galaxy is a network of starbases and you, the last of our starfighters. You are the last hope to fight back, defeat the Xylons, and bring peace and freedom once more to the galaxy. This, according to the manual, it is only a simulation, but your rank within the Star Raiders unit depends on how well you do. This manual, by any unit of measurement, is extensive, and almost all of it has information that you're going to need. It's 34 pages long, and we're only going to touch on the highlights of the game here. We'll get into it a little bit, but there is a ton of information.
All right. You have 4 choices of difficulty: novice, pilot, warrior, and commander. Each difficulty level has a limit to how good of a rank that you can get. So you can't ever get a Star Commander Class 1 rating on an easier game. So if you select the novice level, there are 3 star bases to defend, 9 enemy sectors with a total of 27 enemy combat ships. With shields on, your starship cannot be damaged at all, and we'll get into that later, the damage part. And the computer steers for you during hyperwarp. So you got training wheels on your spaceship. The pilot level, there are 4 star bases to defend, 12 enemy sectors with a total of 36 enemy ships. Your starship can be damaged even with the shields on, and you must steer during hyperwarp, otherwise you're going to land in the wrong sector. The warrior level has 5 star bases, 15 enemy sectors with a total of 45 enemy ships. Again, starship can be damaged with shields on, steering required during hyperwarp, and now enemy attacks are faster and more devastating. And then finally, the commander level, there are 6 star bases to defend, 18 enemy sectors with 54 enemy ships. Boy, that's going to take up a lot of the map there. Starship can be damaged with shields on, steering required, and basically constant attacks under very hazardous conditions. Commander missions are only recommended for the most experienced Star Raiders or Captain Bob.
Your Star Cruiser 7 is equipped with the following: shields, an attack computer, a galactic chart, hyperwarp engines, photon torpedoes, control panel display, long-range sector scan, a manual target selector, a tracking computer, and a subspace radio. We will discuss each of these as we explain the fundamentals of the game. With the 5200 controller, you'll pilot Star Cruiser 7, control both the twin ion and hyperwarp engines, call up computer displays, track the enemy, fire your photon missiles, and dock at a starbase. Now let's talk about the control keys. The asterisk button is your speed mode button. Once you've pressed start, this key puts your starship into speed mode. When your starship is in speed mode, the keys on the keypad control the twin ion engines and regulate the forward speed. Each key sets up a speed or velocity from 0 to 9.
So one thing to point out, if you've never played the Atari computer version, is that this is a joystick/keyboard game. Obviously, you're hitting literally 0 through 9 on your keyboard. You're hitting H for hyperspace, S for shields, and so forth. So what they did is they've boiled down all those controls from the computer version onto the keypad on the 5200, which is quite awesome.
Oh, and not to forget, the 0 button has 2 functions. It stops you completely, putting you to speed 0. It also allows you to abort a hyperspace jump when you're in the middle of it. The control mode button also can be used at the beginning of the game to select the game difficulty.
And then we have control mode. When your starship is in control mode, All the number keys on your keypad operate the Starship equipment or program modes of operation.
The number 1 button activates your forward view. Number 2 button activates your aft view. Number 3 is going to be your long-range scan. Number 4 button is where you go to see your galactic chart. Number 5 is to turn on your tracking. Number 6 is to turn on your shields. Number 7 is to turn on your attack computer. Number 8 gets you into hyperspace. Number 9 selects manual targeting.
The analog stick rotates 360 degrees and handles your Starship with ease. Then we have the thrust rates. Star Cruiser 7 can turn, climb, and dive at 4 different thrust rates. When the control stick is centered, your ship is at 0 thrust. The further from the center you move the control stick, the more thrust you apply, and the faster your Starship moves. And that's one of the good times when you have the nice analog stick on the 5200. That's one nice thing to have that stick.
On the computer version, you're obviously using an 8-way joystick, so you have basically 1 thrust speed. You have, are you diving or climbing, period, or not? You know, there's no level of granularity there. So now I'm really interested to actually go try this game next time I find someone with C200 hanging around. Maybe at the thing next weekend.
It does make a difference. The 8-bit line, if people didn't know, use the same joysticks pretty much as the Atari 2600. You could buy aftermarket sticks, but they're still digital, 8-way only.
I've also heard that this game you can play with the trackball for the 5200, right?
No. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll plug it in right now. I think I don't think the way the trackball works is if you're sitting still, when you put an input in, it carries it. Because this thing is an analog joystick, if you have this thing hard over to the left, it still sends a signal saying, "Hey, I'm over here to the left," so it will continue to turn. It's really kind of haphazard on how this works. I will plug mine in. Give me a moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, theoretically, right, in order for the trackball, in order for you to go a certain direction or keep going in that direction, I think you have to keep spinning the ball in that direction, right?
You have to.
Oh.
You know, it's funny. I can't test the trackball. I was bidding on a trackball, and someone on eBay managed to get my trackball unit.
I'm just going to mail you that trackball so this can come to an end.
I just plug it in. It is completely unplayable.
Or is it a challenge?
No, it's completely unplayable. You have to just to move. It only sends a little bit of the signal, so you have insane accuracy, but you only move. It only reads it as, oh, I'm only supposed to move this far, because it doesn't have the potentiometer telling it, hey, go over here. It just kind of sits there, and you just kind of scroll up and down, but it only goes one speed, which is really slow. So there you go.
That's taking the Indy 500 control and trying to play Pong with it.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's it. I think that's an excellent analogy. This it's not set up for it, and unlike a lot of our other episodes where we say, "Oh, you gotta use the trackball on this." Star Raiders is not a trackball game. I can attest to that right here, right now.
All right, homebrew developers, another challenge. No,
there you go.
They need to get work with an Oculus Rift. That's what they need to do. That's a homebrew. Some VR Star Raiders.
Well, that's a challenge that our good buddy Steve Averett should tackle. I mean, this guy is the master of adapters and controllers. Maybe he could pull it off. We'll have to, if he listens to the podcast, we'll see if he accepts our challenge.
Okay, we have fire buttons. Once you press the start, you can fire photon torpedoes. Press one or both of the lower red buttons on your 5200 controller and watch the photon torpedoes travel towards the center of the television screen and disappear in the distance. The two upper red buttons have no function, so you can press the upper and lower buttons at the same time if you like.
So in the 8-bit version, it shoots, left to right, back and forth, kind of. Every once in a while, it can shoot both photons at the same time. These buttons don't control that at all, right? They still Doesn't matter which button you push, it's still going to shoot one or the other. Okay.
No, it's not like a right-left torpedo. No, it's just same thing. It just fires whichever one was last fired to the opposite side.
Okay, thanks.
Now, the all-important shields. Unlike TIE fighters that have no shields, here we do. Before you set out on a mission, you want to press the shields key, which is number 6, and turn on your shields. Shields on appears momentarily at the top of your screen, and the space looks blue, which is a nice touch. It looks like you're actually looking through your shields.
No, I love that.
With the shields on,
awesome.
It is. It adds more, making you more in-depth, more involved in the game when you do stuff like that. And it's a nice touch. With the shields on, your starship can never be destroyed by proton torpedoes or meteors. Unless, of course, it hyperwarps into a meteor. Without shields, it hasn't a snowball's chance. At novice skill level, shields prevent your starship from being damaged. All the other skill levels, shields give protection, but do not prevent damage.
Okay, so the attack computer. To turn on your attack computer, press the attack key, number 7. Attack computer on appears momentarily at the top of the screen, along with target crosshairs and the attack computer display. That's a little kind of grid thing at the bottom right. To turn off attack computer...
If you've seen a $6 million man, it'd be his bionic eye looking through right.
There you go. To turn off the attack computer display, press attack key number 7 again. Galactic chart. After turning on your shields and the attack computer, press the galactic chart key number 4 to display the galactic chart and target data. The chart shows you the whole galaxy divided into sectors if your galaxy happens to be a rectangle. Some sectors contain enemy spacecraft or friendly star bases. Others are uninhabited. Star bases are indicated by a circle with little dots kind of sticking out the side. It looks kind of like an underwater mine. And Xylon spaceships are identified as follows. Kind of looks like a little airplane. It's a patrol consisting of 2 enemy ships. Another one looks like 3 little dashes. That's a task force of 3 enemy ships. And then one with little 4 dots in it. That's a fleet of 4 enemy ships. Marking the target. Choose an enemy target sector. With the control stick, move the cursor from its position in the center of the chart to the target sector. Note that a blinking ring remains in the center. The ring marks the sector you move from. The cursor marks the sector you move to. Note the cursor can wrap around the galactic chart vertically and horizontally. For example, can leave the galactic chart at the bottom and reappear at the top, or leave the chart at the right and side and appear at the left side. Warp energy. You must hyperwarp from sector to sector. And that uses up a lot of energy. The further the target, the more energy you use. In general, it is more economical to cover the galactic chart in short jumps. Enemy position. Xylon ships constantly shift sectors in an effort to surround and destroy star bases. And one thing I wanted to note here is yet another cultural reference in this game, along with Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars. We've also got Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because some of the sound effects, the kind of the warnings you get when the bad guys are doing something to your star bases. This game just ripped off everything.
Yeah.
I just finished up the game that I was playing. My rating is Star Commander Class 4.
Awesome.
So,
nice.
Well done.
Nice.
So that's me knocking the rust off. So I still have a little bit of talent and everything. So there you go.
All right, so they go on, you will save yourself a lot of grief if you go after targets that are in dangerous positions, such as next to a starbase.
Your subspace radio will flash starbase surrounded on your screen when Xylon combat ships surround a starbase. So after the warning, you have 1 minute to clear enemy ships from a sector next to the starbase and save the base. If the Xylons succeed in destroying the starbase, you will lose a vital energy and repair port, and the Xylons will build 2 new combat ships out of the starbase debris. So note, the Xylon fleet will attempt to surround and destroy only 1 starbase at a time, but they are efficient at it. I mean, they are very efficient at it. They'll swarm around it, and so one of my little things is I look for one of the ones where it only has the 2 fighters in it, and I go for that. So That's the one that I try to knock out first and foremost. So the Xylons will shift sectors at different rates depending on their size. A patrol will move the fastest, a task force at half the speed of a patrol, and a fleet at approximately an eighth of the speed of the patrol. Some target data. When you have selected your target, read the target data under the galactic chart. Warp energy, number of energy units required to hyperwarp to the sector selected. Targets, number of enemy targets in the sector selected. Stardate, elapsed time during a mission, measured in cantons, or I'm sorry, not cantons, but centons. Canton, Ohio, there you go. 100 centons equals 1 minute. The enemy
That's not too much of a Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, that's a blatant ripoff right there.
That is complete blatant ripoff. The enemy may jump from one sector to another when the stardate counter crosses 0.00 or 0.50. I did not know any of this. Mm-hmm. Was this in the manual itself?
Yes, plagiarized from the manual.
Wow, I must have glazed over it. So,
well, let's just put it straight, okay? You're so good at this game, you're so quick that you're moving, you're grooving. It doesn't even matter to you. What it matters is to the people like me who take 5 hours to contemplate a next move. And
I hear you.
Yeah, so for me, when I was playing this, I saw the star date changing, and when I saw it basically going, either rolling over to 0 or getting to the halfway point, I saw then you could see all of the ships move over a sector.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, you've never witnessed that because of your quickness, your lightning speed.
I'm too busy trying to gun them all down and everything.
That's right. Okay, what's important thing to take a look at is when you're looking at damage control, you'll be able to see at the bottom of your screen different systems abbreviated by different letters. So DC equals damage control, P equals photon torpedoes, E equals engines, S equals shield, C equals computer, L equals long-range scan, R equals subspace radio. And depending on the status of the equipment, it changes color. So if it remains blue, it's normal, it's not damaged. It changes yellow when it gets damaged, and it changes to the color red when it's destroyed. The hyperspace key turns on your hyperwarp engines. And hyperwarp engaged appears momentarily at the top of the screen. Before you can activate your hyperwarp engines, however, be sure the attack computer is on. You'll need the crosshairs for navigating in hyperspace and the attack computer display for moving targets. So basically when you're playing levels of difficulty above novice, what's going to happen is as you're flying through hyperspace, you have to keep your crosshairs within a reticule in order to make sure that you end up exactly where you chose on the galactic map that you wanted to end up. If you deviate too far from that, as Bill said earlier, you may end up in a neighboring sector beyond where you actually wanted to show up.
So and the bad thing about that is using energy, and your ship only has so much energy between your jumps.
Yeah. Another thing to point out is the hyperspace effect is kind of like the start 3D Starfield, but they start trailing at you, kind of like leaving little lines, and again another Star Wars. The Millennium Falcon going to hyperwarp. That's exactly what Doug was going for, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
exactly.
I love the part where you actually, when you're entering a sector, and it goes into red alert. You don't know what's waiting for you, and all of a sudden, you get the alarm goes on. And it's just it's a lot of great tension just before you get there.
I've got a little hint, at least from playing the computer version, and I'm going to assume it's going to be the same on the 5200. Yeah. So in the levels where you have to keep the crosshair centered during hyperwarp, that happens right at the beginning of hyperwarp. As your ship goes from whatever speed it's at up to maximum speed and then beyond into the hyperwarp mode. And once you're in hyperwarp, the actual frame rate the game goes down a bit. So the amount that crosshair wiggles around and how much you have to fight it actually goes down a bit because it's not updating as quickly. So the trick I found is before doing a hyperwarp, I hit number 9, speed 9, get as fast as I can go, and then hit hyperwarp, and then I basically don't need to finagle the crosshair quite as much or quite as hard at the very beginning, and that helps me with kind of hyperwarp accuracy. So little tip.
That's a good tip. I didn't know that.
While you're traveling through hyperspace at hyperwarp, and you're entering a sector. When you enter the sector occupied by Xylon combat ships, the computer flashes hyperspace and sounds the red alert. Note that the target marker showing the position of the target relative to your starship appears on the attack computer display. When you enter a sector with a starbase in it, Hyperwarp Complete flashes at the top of the screen, and a target marker showing you the position of the starbase appears in the attack computer display. When you enter an empty target sector, Hyperwarp Complete flashes on the screen, but there is no target marker in the attack computer display. Now, while you're in Hyperwarp, going from one place to another, you can abort the Hyperwarp. So if you're in Hyperwarp, when you get a starbase-surrounded message, you can abort the hyperwarp and return to the galactic chart and see which starbase is in trouble. To abort hyperwarp, you press the abort 0 key. When hyperwarp aborted appears on your screen, press the galactic chart key 4. Photon torpedoes. A photon torpedo is a burst of concentrated energy that can completely destroy an enemy spaceship, meteor, or another photon torpedo.
And was totally ripped off from Star Trek. Sorry.
They had no shame. They got all of them.
How many TV shows and movies?
Okay.
Right. I'll shut up now.
Okay. So no. What I want to ask then: how was there no lawsuits for this game? Universal should have got pissed off because of the BSG.
Well,
Lucasfilm should have got pissed off because of the TIE Fighter.
Well, Universal only gets pissed off when it's really not that property, and they're suing to make it think it is.
Donkey Kong?
Yeah, King Kong.
Exactly.
That's right. Okay.
Exactly.
As long as you have energy, you'll never run out of torpedoes. But each time you fire, 10 units of energy are used up. If you hit another torpedo head-on, 100 units of energy are used up. You should make each photon torpedo count and not fire randomly. Your starship is equipped with 2 torpedo launchers, one on the port and one on the starboard sides. You can only fire 1 torpedo at a time, except when the attack computer locks your torpedoes onto the target. Then the fire button launches both photon torpedoes simultaneously. And that's cathartic.
Yeah. So lock-on occurs when the target marker is centered in the attack computer. So basically, you're dead on target. And the horizontal vertical coordinates in the control panel read basically +00. So you're pointing right at it. You also have to be close enough. So when that happens, all sorts of little arrows light up basically in the attack computer display. And that point, that's when you want to press fire. And they say you have a 90% kill probability at this time. So the game basically gives you a little bit of an edge if you aim really well. So note, of course, you can hit an enemy without locking on your torpedoes, but you use up more energy. When you hit a target, it explodes into silver particles and slows down your game a little bit. Sorry, guys. If your target is a Xylon fighter or cruiser, your hit destroys it and the computer credits you with a kill. If it's a Xylon base star, a hit does not always destroy it. As mentioned earlier, base stars are protected by shields and can only be destroyed by a direct hit. So basically, you need to be close enough to them. When an enemy ship hits your starship with the shields on, the screen flashes red and blue. If your ship is damaged, damage control sounds a warning and flashes a message on your screen telling you what equipment has been damaged or destroyed. After you've wiped out the Xylon spacecraft in a sector, a target marker in the attack computer display appears. Return to the galactic chart and select another sector. So just keep weeding them out. Long-range sector scan. This is a really cool feature of this game. When there's a target marker in the attack computer display, but you can't seem to find the target, you can use the long-range sector scan by pressing the scan key, number 3. The long-range sector scan shows you a top view of the sector your spaceship is in. Your spaceship is in the center, and all objects in the sector rotate around it. It's a really cool effect. You see the stars around you, and as you rotate, it's as if you're spinning a ball with your ship in the middle. To use a sector scan, 1, select a target. 2, move the control stick to the left until the target is directly in front of you. I guess you could go to the right, but that's just what the manual says. Move the control stick forward or back, depending on the position of the target, until the target is as far above your starship as possible. And that basically means it's on the same plane as your ship, so it's going to be straight ahead. And then enter speed mode and use your engines to approach the target. Select a moderate speed, 3, 4, 5. You're not in a rush. Minor course corrections may be needed as you approach the target. Repeat steps 2 and 3 if required. Finally, if the target is very close to your starship, press the 0 key to stop the engines. And the target should now be visible in the 4 view.
We have the manual target selector. When more than one Xylon ship is attacking, the attack computer decides which target to track and display. The computer selects a target at random unless you are on a space duel, in which case it selects the target that is shooting at you, which is kind of helpful in being shot at. If you wish to select a different target, press the manual key, which is number 9, to override the computer and call up the manual target selector. Normally only 2 Xylons attack at the same time. The control panel shows them as T0 and T1, target 0 and target 1. If T0 is displayed, pressing the manual key automatically selects T1 and vice versa. To return to the automatic selection, press the manual key 9 again.
And I guess one of the things this affects is at the bottom of your screen, you've got little things that we're probably going to talk about that shows you, how far the enemy is and how far up and down or left and right they are from you. And that changes, which one is obviously going to be represented by that one little display.
The tracking computer automatically tracks the selected target as it moves from fore to aft of your starship. The television screen switches between fore and aft views as the tracking computer tracks the target. Pressing the tracking key, which is number 5, to turn on the tracking computer. Warning: this mode should only be used by experienced space pilots only. It is possible to get caught in a crossfire of 2 enemy ships, one in front, the other behind the starship. As they alternately fire at you, the computer will constantly switch between fore and aft views, so fast that only experienced Star Raiders will be able to survive.
Or Captain Bob.
Okay, absolutely Captain Bob, without question. Actually, I will not play Star Raiders above the novice level, to be honest. I am not that good at the game. I'm working on it, though.
Doesn't matter, as long as it's fun.
It is, and people listen to this podcast, really, if you can definitely play this game, even on an emulator, just to get an idea of what it's like. It's a really fun game, even this many years later. The subspace radio is used to update the galactic chart and relay the messages: Starbase surrounded, Starbase destroyed, which you don't want to see. It also generates the targets displayed below the galactic chart. Your starship has 9,999 units of energy at the start of each mission. Each operation drains some of the energy. Note that the faster your starship travels, the more energy you use. The longer the hyperwarp jump, the greater the energy drain. Jumps of 5 seconds or more are very costly. If you must go a long distance, try to do it in several small jumps instead of one long jump. When energy falls below 1,000 units, the control panel flashes a red warning. You can refuel at any starbase provided your starship has the energy to get there. Damage control flashes a message on your screen when any of these units is damaged or destroyed. Photon torpedoes, the twin ion engines, your shields, the attack computer, long-range scan, or subspace radio. The damage control indicator below the galactic chart keeps track of the equipment that is damaged or destroyed.
Phew, 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 phew. Sorry.
No problem.
Scotty, I need photon torpedoes now, Scotty.
I'm doing the best I can, Captain.
Now, the Buck Rogers didn't have photon torpedoes. It was just Star Wars. Well, Star Wars and Star Trek had photon torpedoes. No, Star Wars was proton.
Proton. Yeah, those were proton torpedoes.
Well, you see, they didn't want to get sued. by Paramount.
They did. You know, I'm gonna have all the Star Wars and Star Trek guys shooting down my door now. Okay, so photon torpedoes. When your photon torpedoes are damaged, only one operates. But you can't continue your mission. When they are destroyed, your position is suicidal. Get out of the target sector fast. Find a starbase on the galactic chart and hyperwarp to it for repairs. Twin ion engines. You know, that's a Star Wars thing right there again, but whatever. Your engines will work when damaged, thanks to a backup impulse system. However, progress will be slow. If your engines are destroyed, your speed will be very slow and your starship will be extremely vulnerable. Shields will flicker when damaged, and the control panel display and galactic chart will turn yellow. If you take a hit when your shields have flickered off, you will be destroyed in a blinding flash. Don't take chances. When your shields are damaged, get out of the sector fast and hyperwarp to the closest starbase. When the computer is damaged, your coordinates in the control panel display are lost. When your computer is destroyed, all computer functions cease. The manual target selector and tracking computer do not function, and the target crosshairs and the attack computer display disappear. It will be extremely difficult to steer in hyperspace and dock at a starbase without the crosshairs and attack computer display. But you can do it. Damage to the long-range scan can cause a mirror image of every object being scanned. You will have to distinguish between the real object and its reflection. If the subspace radio is damaged, the galactic chart will not be updated. However, moving the cursor around the galactic chart will update the targets indicated below in the galactic chart and show you the number of enemy targets in each sector. If the radio is destroyed, you're in big trouble. No starbase messages will be relayed, so you'll not know when a starbase is being surrounded or attacked. Hyperwarp to a starbase and repair your radio at once.
When your energy supply falls below 1,000 units or your ship needs repairs, return to the galactic chart and find a starbase. Position the cursor in the center of the starbase sector. The closer the cursor is to the center, the closer your starship will be to the starbase when you arrive at the sector, I guess. Engage hyperwarp by pressing the hyperspace key, 8. If you are on course when hyperwarp complete flashes on your screen, a target marker should appear in the attack computer display. So here are the steps. 1, bring the starbase within range. Press the speed mode key, star, and select an appropriate speed key. Decrease your speed as you approach the starbase. When range is plus 000, press speed key to 0 to stop your engines. When you have the starbase locked on, orbit established should appear momentarily on your screen. When orbit is established, you will receive a message to stand by while the transfer vehicle leaves the starbase and services your starship. Fill her up. When the transfer complete appears, your starship is ready to hyperwarp to another sector. Re-enter control mode and return to the galactic chart. And I want to make a note here. Do not follow the transfer vessel and find out where he's going, because you'll discover that he doesn't return to the starbase. He just keeps going. He just leaves. I'm fed up with this job. I'm never going back to that starbase again. One thing to mention, the shape of the starbase, it kind of looks like a blob, but if you imagine was a Space Station 5 or whatever they called it, the big kind of donut ring-shaped space station from 2001, I think that's what the starbase is supposed to look at, but kind of like edge on. It looks like maybe you're looking at little windows or docking ports or something, and it's supposed to kind of look kind of 3D, but it's all one color, so it's kind of...
I thought they were ripping off Carvel, and they're using the Carvel saucers.
I don't know. We'll have to ask Doug Neubauer once it comes out of hiding.
I wanted to say something because I was saving this, and you actually commented on it. One time, I remember when I was a kid, and I had been repaired and refueled by that little spaceship, and for whatever reason, I decided, okay, let's destroy the starbase. So I destroyed the starbase. You know, that's gratitude for you. And I kept following that little guy, and he just kept going somewhere, but not anywhere in particular. And I just kept following him for a few minutes.
I think also because of the number of sprites that the Atari has, this is kind of the key as to why you can only have 2 enemies on screen at once, as there's only basically 5 player missile graphics that you can use to draw stuff. If you shoot both photon torpedoes at once, I believe that little guy just vanishes. He just disappears. It's not that you're shooting him. It's just like he's no longer appearing on the screen anymore because now Photon is more important.
But I remember doing that, and I felt so sorry for him because I had destroyed his base,
his home,
and he was like wandering aimlessly.
My wife and kids were on there.
Okay.
I have a little story about we talked very, very early in the beginning about how this game runs even when you're doing other stuff. You can be looking at the galactic chart, and you can also be getting shot at the same time if you happen to be in a sector full of bad guys. I remember one time I was limping along. I lost my photons. My shields were completely gone. I managed to, I think my engines were gone. I managed to inch my way to a starbase. I had to fire up the hyperspace to navigate within the sector to get to the starbase. And I finally arrived at it, and I go, okay. And I go look at the map. And then the next thing I hear is do. And I go back to the 4 view. Starbase is gone. And there's a couple of dudes just firing volleys at me, and then I was dead. And it was just like, I was so close. I was just about to get repaired. So yeah, the game can be really cruel. But that's what's awesome about it. It's kind of like Adventure on 2600. There's just such a kind of open-ended little universe in its own right that so many different things can happen. It's not the same game every time. So starbase destroyed. If a Xylon destroys your starbase while you're attempting a docking, you will find yourself in any enemy-occupied territory, as I just explained, and under attack by 2 new enemy ships created from the starbase debris. Oh, ouch. That's creepy if you think about it a little bit too hard. If your starship is in shape to fight, you can engage and destroy the enemy before you leave the sector. The target marker remains in the attack computer display after the starbase is destroyed, so you can track the enemy. If you're not in a position to fight your way out of the sector, recenter the control mode and return to the galactic chart to find another starbase, and hope you don't get shot in the meantime. All right, so rating. A mission ends when you destroy all enemy targets and complete your mission. Yay! You run out of energy and your mission is aborted. Boo. Or your starship is destroyed. Ooh, that's even worse. No matter how your mission ends, you will receive a rating on your performance. A posthumous rating, I never know how to pronounce that word, if your starship is destroyed. Mission control bases each rating on the following factors: mission skill level, number of enemy combat ships destroyed, amount of energy used, and length of time taken to complete mission. There's a formula in the manual to explain the exact calculation used to calculate your rank, so go look that up on the internet. Your new rank is displayed at the top of the television screen by rank and class. There are 5 classes per rank, Class 1 being the highest and Class 5 being the lowest. If you don't score at least 48 points in a mission, your new rank will be Galactic Cook, or Garbage Scow Captain.
That's me.
That's me too. Promotions are based solely on ratings. So the different rankings are Rookie, Novice, Ensign, Pilot, Ace, Lieutenant, Warrior, Captain, Commander, and Star Commander. There are no shortcuts to success in the Star Raiders. Don't be surprised if your first pilot mission ends with a demotion to Galactic Cook or Garbage Scout Captain. As for Star Commander, few ever make it.
Or Captain
Is there
Bob.
a high score club for this game, by the way?
I don't know. We should look it up.
All right.
On behalf of the staff of the Atari 5200 podcast, I would like to thank the awesome Bill Kendrick for being on the show today.
Yes, thank you, and thanks to my family for putting up with me. So,
all right.
Yeah,
eye roll. Oh, she gave me an eye roll.
Okay.
She's trying to do legitimate work, and I'm here like, talk about video games.
This is legitimate. You're making history. This will go down in the annals of internet history.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm going to duck off.
All right.
So hopefully you guys have a good recording because it's going to end right now if I'm mine. So.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Bill, hey, again, thank you so much. And,
yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay.
And we may drag you on at another time to share the misery and everything. But nonetheless.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
All right, take care.
All right. The illustrious Bill Kendrick has left.
Awesome. No, I had to hear you say that right at the end.
Oh, okay.
Okay, bye, guys.
Okay, bye.
So when you start this game, you're in an empty sector with all of your systems powered down and cruising at speed level 5. The view in front of you is the iconic streaking starfield that blew everyone's mind almost 40 years ago. The lower portion of the screen is the attack computer display. It displays fuel, energy units, XY coordinates, and range of the enemy ship that it's currently tracking. The target lock display and the system status, kills, and velocity. Again, this is done very simply, but it is quick to comprehend and get used to. These things to get these things going, I personally go immediately to the galactic map, and I warp to the thickest cluster of ships. That's usually where they're going to start to try to surround your starbase. While this is happening, I power up my shield, my targeting computer during the warp process. Now, the thing is, it's kind of tricky because you're also steering as you're powering everything up. So you can get off track a little bit. What I do is I get the cursor as close to the center of the grid square as possible when I am selecting a sector. When this happens, when you get as close as you can, when you warp into that sector, you're going to be very close to the ships. If you're kind of on the fringes of it, you're going to have to kind of get your speed up, and you're going to have to take time to get towards your enemies that you have to take out. Getting the ships close to your final location in the sector when you drop out of warp is really one of the key things to keep your time down. And remember, this whole game is about time. This gives you the possibility of destroying the enemy ships, and I love doing this when I can do it. But you can destroy the enemy ships as you decelerate from warp, and with the close proximity of the other ships of the fleet, it gives you the chance to warp immediately to another grid using only the warp reticle to get to the next grid square. No need to go to the map. You already know where they're at. So notice that I'm using words like immediately and proximity. The key to this game is time. This, I would say, is your greatest enemy in this game. It's time. It plays out in real time, so there's no rest. You'll be running and gunning the whole time. A Star Commander Class 1 game should take no more than about 10 minutes to play with one visit to a starbase and no starbase losses. So it's intense. When you fire, the photon cannons fire one side at a time. If you get a full lock on an enemy ship, and again, refer to the manual on how that's done, both cannons fire simultaneously. You have to be close in to do this, but it's an excellent way to take out the base stars. In fact, it's almost the only way to take out a base star. And I've pounded on these things before. In fact, the game I just played, that thing took 3 direct shots, and it just whizzed right on by. Now, as you progress and dogfight your way through the galaxy, your ship is going to sustain damage. Your success depends on how you can mitigate the damage. Examples are using alternate means of getting the information you need to keep the battle going when a system is damaged or destroyed. My engines got destroyed on this last game. I was using the hyperspace to kind of pick my way through the sector. You know, you can use your attack computer to close in on enemy targets when your long-range scanner is damaged or destroyed. There's a number of different things. The only 2 things I can think of that you cannot fight without are destroyed photons for obvious reasons and destroyed shields. You just do not want to take on a fight with destroyed shields. This brings us to the subject of starbases. Starbases are scattered throughout the galaxy, and you have to defend them. You do this by preventing the base from being surrounded by Xylons. If the Xylons surround a starbase, you have 1 minute to clear those things out, at least on one of the sectors adjacent to the base, or it will be destroyed. The good news is, if you are damaged, you can dock with the starbase and get everything repaired afterwards. You could do this as many times as you need or want, but remember that docking takes time. If you're going for a Star Commander Class 1 rating, you have only 1 visit to a starbase to make it happen. Any more in your dock points. You can get a Star Commander rating, like I did. I can't remember if I went once or twice, but I got Star Commander Class 4. It won't be a Class 1. So the key is to be quick. Master the flyby. So what is a flyby? That's when an enemy ship flies by the forward view and switches to the rear view. I keep the tracking in auto mode. I prefer it that way. And I got really good at the control reversal. So when the switch happens, that can be devastating to the enemy. The computer is counting on you to basically really not be too good at dealing with the rear view. So if you're good, you win the battle. If you can make that control switch over in your mind and in your hand. An interesting aspect of the game is when you blow something up. The game slows down. This is a byproduct of the pokey chip calculating the visual effect of a ship or a starbase or a meteor breaking up and exploding. I've always used this one to my advantage, but it can bite you as well. Our good friends over at the Player Missile podcast were working with the source code to make everything work in real time. An interesting aspect to bring into such a game such as this. And I thought it was done for dramatic effect, but it turns out it's actually the computer slowing down and doing the calculation. All right, so now we got to get back to the controller. As we've discussed, and I actually demonstrated, this is unplayable with the trackball. So don't even bother using your trackball on this one. Controllers are the usual fare, and as far as an in-flight ship are concerned, you push forward to pitch down, pull back to pitch up. Left and right are still the same. However, unlike its 8-bit counterpart, the analog controllers make this game border on simulation. The amount of control over maneuvering the ship is unprecedented and is excellent even by today's standards. The action and control is fluid and it is flawless. I say this with a fair amount of reserve. I'm going to say this with a lot of reserve, but part of me wants to say this may have been considered the pack-in for this game console. I don't know if, Pac-Man was nice because everybody got Pac-Man, Super Breakout, okay, but, in my opinion, it should have been either Centipede or this game. I think that would have really given it some value added for people buying the game machine in the first place. All right, now for the keypad. I can't think of another game developed for this console that really utilizes the 5200 keypad more than this one. It is more than a keypad. It is a multifunction control unit capable of controlling speed in every function of the ship. This is done through a two-layer philosophy. Activate one layer to have the keypad control speed, the other layer for ship system. It is simple yet elegant solution to get almost 20 different functions out of this controller. I play this with both the native controllers and the Wiko joystick and keypad setup. I personally prefer the native controllers. I like the fact that my hands are closer together so I can do keyboard inputs while holding the joystick. I feel like I have more control and command of the ship. There are times I don't want the joystick to center. In fact, in aviation, we call this neutral stability. After listening to Eric Wilmunder's interview on Antic, it makes more sense to me why I want that property in the game. A quick shout-out to Ed Kelly of Ed Ladden Controllers. Got to get this out there. So, Ed, if you're listening, if you're going to design the 5200 controller ergonomics around a game, do it for this one. All the other games are going to fall into place. I attribute a lot of my success to being a professional pilot to this game. A lot of the skills to be successful at this game directly translates to the hand-eye coordination that I use to fly an airplane. If there's a video game where you look out the window and shoot something, it was inspired by this one. Wing Commander, Star Wars X-Wing, Chuck Yeager's Air Combat, Elite, you name it. This list goes on. Also, the Atari Force comics that were launched with the Atari 2600 series of games expanded further on this mythos, and it continued through the DC Comics series of the same name. The Star Raider was an all-out, no-holds-barred starfighter that was built by an ancient civilization that never got the chance to see battle until the Atari Force found it. There it was used to attack and defeat another recurring character in the Atari Force universe, the Dark Destroyer. A graphic novel was even published under the name Star Raiders by Elliot S. Magan and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. I love that name. That is an awesome name. And it picks up right after where the Atari Force leaves off in the action. In fact, the game manual has an introduction by none other than Commander Champion himself. In this case, the Star Raider is not the ship, but the elite unit of pilots that make up the Star Raiders squadron.
Okay, where to buy? Best Electronics has boxed games for $15, loose for $10, but this is a game you're going to want the overlay and the instruction book. B&C Computer Visions, you can find this loose for $5. eBay loose anywhere starting from $5.94. However, good old Venezuela comes through with brand new $6.99.
Believe it or not, my dad was working under the house when, and this was a few years back when he gave me back my all my equipment that I had. And believe it or not, he found a Star Raiders overlay in the dirt underneath the house.
Wow.
What?
Yeah. He goes, hey, does it belong to anything of yours? And I was like, oh my God, it's a Star Raider. Yes, absolutely. Give me that. So here are some other ports that this game has done and reviews. So this game, as we talked about earlier, it's been ported to the 2600. And if you ask me, it's almost unplayable. It's good for what it is, but there's nothing that compares to this machine. Other ports to other systems have been made, as well as in anthology collections, not to mention all the copycats that have been produced. One that comes to mind is Star Voyager by Imagic, and the vastly superior game on the 2600, which is Star Master by Activision. And I think Bill talked about something about Battlesphere for the Jaguar is basically Star Raiders, but with a goofy sense of humor like Babylon 5, Red Dwarf, and more like that. All right, so some reviews from yesteryear. Compute Magazine. Anybody remember Compute Magazine? Mm-hmm. I think most of us here do. Back in 1980, wrote that Star Raiders is, and I quote, incredibly exciting to play and just about as much fun to watch, unquote. It praised the game's use of color and sound to alert the player and warned that this game is addictive. The game is absolutely guaranteed to put calluses on your trigger finger. InfoWorld, the magazine, reported that Star Raiders' complexity encouraged cooperative gameplay and that over 20 hours of grueling tests by a battery of ingenious children had proven that it was free of bugs.
Byte wrote in 1981, what can you say about a game that takes your breath away? There's not enough words to describe Star Raiders. Just as VisiCalc software has enticed many people into buying an Apple II computer, I'm sure that Star Raiders cartridge has sold its share of Atari 400 and 800 computers. It concluded to all software vendors, this is the game you have to surpass to get our attention.
Electronic Games agreed, reporting that it is the game that, in the opinion of many, sells a lot of 400 computer systems. And basically, they just came out and said that, hey, software developers, this is the game you're going to have to surpass over the next year or so.
Softline in 1982 called Star Raiders quite a game. Stands repeat play well and remains quite difficult. In 1983, the magazine's readers named it the most popular Atari program ever, with a 65% more weighted votes than the second-place winner, Jawbreaker. And in 1984, they named the game the most popular Atari program of all time.
Yeah, it's that good. The Addison Wesley Book of Atari Software back in 1984 gave it an overall A rating, praising the realistic graphics and sound, and the book concluded that the game is simply great, and that despite limitations, or I should say despite limitations, Star Raiders remains the classic. Antic Magazine in 1986 stated that it was the first program that showed all of the Atari computer's audio and visual capabilities. It was just a game, yes, but it revolutionized the idea of what a personal computer could be made to do.
On March 12, 2007, the New York Times reported that Star Raiders was named to a list of the 10 most important video games of all time, the so-called Game Canon.
And the Library of Congress took up a video game preservation proposal and began with the games from this list, including Star Raiders. Video Game Critic gives it a C+, while the readers give it an overall B. Cafe Man's 5200 page gives it a recommended in italics and with an exclamation mark. Atari HQ gives it a 10. Atari Times gives it a 100%, and Atari HQ and Atari Times are not averaging here, but they basically, they kind of go through it all, like I do it towards the end here, and what they do is they go ahead and they say, okay, well, it's awesome, even though the graphics aren't the best, it's good enough. Atari Mania and the readers give it a 9.3 out of 10. Atari Protos says that this belongs in every 5200 library and that the analog joysticks and keypad were made for this game. I completely agree with that. So, here's my review of Star Raiders. Graphics. I'm going to say 7 out of 10. This doesn't have the greatest graphics, but I think that this was a necessary sacrifice and a relic of its time to supporting the amazing gameplay, and the movement of all the sprites is absolutely flawless. The graphics are just good enough to satisfy the world building that happens, and this is a tough category to judge because this is the first of its kind, does it compare to today's games? Not a chance, but what it does do, does it do what it needs to do? And without a doubt, that's an absolute yes. Sound and music. Here's where the pokey chip is shining bright again. 9 out of 10. This is just a personal opinion, but a simple musical theme would have been cool to go along with this. But I don't think the RAM would have allowed it. There just wasn't enough room. It would have been cool, but other than that, the sound is great. The cool thing is that every sound, blip, beep, etc., it has a purpose and it has meaning. I think that's why I really like that. Gameplay.
Yeah, I think the music may have actually detracted from the immersive, because it was a very immersive game, and music may have taken it away from that.
Right, and you know what? I completely agree with it. If you could have fit it in, cool. If not, but again, it's just I would have liked a little something, but that's okay. Gameplay, 10 out of 10. In my opinion, this is the best game on the system. It genuinely builds a world, and it's probably one of the very first immersive games made. The first-person out-the-window view brings it home. The amazing part is that this is a real-time game. Nothing stops. The campaign charges on. The native controllers shine with this game. This is why I kind of go towards, this could have been the pack-in. But, hey, you know what? People bought the Atari 400 and 800 computers to play this game. Making it available, they could make another $30 on top of them buying the machine and the game. I see why they did what they did, but, oh well, these things happen. So the analog input really drives this into the world of simulation. I love it. Presentation. I got the boxes and the manual in front of me. This is, again, 10 out of 10. This comes in the standard silver-blue line for the Atari box, but the artwork takes the cake. I love the picture on the cover. The painting conveys the spirit of the game. It's a nonstop fight against impossible odds. It also has a degree of, this is a serious game. There's a weight to all of this. Also, it has a very detailed manual, and the paintings inside are just as great as the ones on the cover. It is very in-depth and probably the biggest one that was ever printed for this system. Overall, it's, if you average everything, it's a 9 out of 10. It's a must-have for the system. And if my emotions were doing the judging, it'd be 75 out of 10. I love this game. So if you do look online, it is a very contentious game to rate. One website may love it, like, Video Game Critic. Somebody will give it 10 out of 10. The Video Game Critic gives it a C+. Some people just don't like the complexity. And if you don't like complexity in a game, then this isn't your game. But you really do need to give it a shot. I think if you start off with the lower levels, you will build your love will grow for this thing. I've seen where some people say that the graphics are kind of meh and that's too complex of a game. I think it's an unfair assessment. I think you need to get into this game. Once you're into it, you're not coming out of it. One thing to be said about this, when you get a rating on this game, it is earned. No doubt about it. And in my opinion, the 5200 was born just to support this game. No other game for this system demonstrates the power of this machine. And when I started digging on all this is just a memory from my youth. But it wasn't until I really started to begin to write the notes for this show that I remembered something from my past. The real brilliance of Star Raiders was its graphic simplicity. It dawned on me that since the graphics were so nondescript, you could imagine the ship to be anything you wanted it to be. Starship Enterprise? Sure. X-Wing Fighter? No problem. The Last Starfighter? Sure, of course. Why not? Your imagination filled in the blanks, and the game became the work you wanted it to be. I loved it.
Excellent.
And it just kind of brings home just how, and again, Glenn, you mentioned it, this game is immersive. And that, you could be anything you want playing this game.
Before Bill left, he left us some information on how we felt about Star Raiders. I'm going to read that right now. He says, I like the box art, but my absolute favorite is the 400-800 version. With the Xylon fighter, a.k.a. TIE Fighter, inexplicably attacking a Xylon base star. In-game, our star bases look like a blob, but I think it's supposed to represent a rotating wheel space station, like Space Station 5 from 2001 and A Space Odyssey, seen edge on. I think I like the 2600 version better, as it has a first-person POV giving you the feel of a lone pilot, which you get from the game. The 5200 one has a bunch of people all over the map.
I think what he's trying to convey there is that you're the lone wolf, you're out there, you're the last starfighter, you're the last one, you're the last hope, and it's only up to you. With this one, it's like, there's with the
support staff and everything else.
There's staff and everything else.
Okay.
But for me, it just kind of drove home that whole thing is, this is a fight. I'm going to quote The Last Starfighter here, the movie, but you are fighting a desperate battle against impossible odds, and it's just I don't know. I love how this can be seen in so many different ways.
Bill had mentioned that the 400-800 manual said you are now part of an elite unit of the Atarian starship fleet, the Star Raiders. That sounds backwards, since the word raider can be defined as a person who attacks an enemy in the enemy's territory, a marauder, or one who engages in a raid or a plunderer. I always figured the Xylons were the raiders. They're attacking our star bases. However, I guess maybe they were going for more of this definition of a special forces operation, a commando, assuming that they gave it any amount of thought. So often the marketing and backstories from the manuals were totally out of whack with the gameplay. I remember always, and what I wanted to say is, when I heard the title of this game, Star Raiders, I always thought that it was referring to the enemy. I never, until I started reading the manual, I never knew that I was the Star Raider.
Yeah, you know what? I think I agree with you, David. I think it was the enemies swarming in. They were the raiders and everything. But again, when this thing gets handed off to marketing, they're going to do whatever they can to sell this game. So,
okay, yeah.
This is Shinto from the Atari Jaguar Game by Game podcast. If you like video games with keypads on the controllers, and heck, who doesn't, then check out my show. And ColecoVisions and Intellivisionaries, but definitely the Atari 5200 podcast. Which you have. Good for you. Now back to the hosts of the Atari 5200 podcast, David and Captain Bob, who were able to store their keypad overlays on the back of the game cartridges. I'm kind of jealous.
All right, so that's pretty much it for Star Raiders. Gentlemen, what are we going to be doing next?
Next episode, Bob will review real sports football and tennis. And that leaves David soccer and baseball. It's our Sports-a-Rama episode.
Neither of us are looking forward to this.
I'm not looking forward to it.
But we will do our best to do these games justice.
We will, and that's exactly it. We'll I think we'll just be very forward with everybody. Just say, hey, listen, I'm not a fan of sports games. I don't like sports games. I'd rather play the sport than play it on a computer. But they sell.
Listen, when I was a kid, the only sport I liked to watch was fake. It was called wrestling.
Yeah, there you go. Loved it.
Okay.
Loved it.
Find us online. On Facebook, search for the Atari 5200 podcast. Or you can go on to Atari Age forums, search the Atari 5200 podcast, new podcast.
Or you can find us on Libsyn at the Atari 5200 Super Podcast.libsyn.com/RSS.
And of course, you can find me on my YouTube channel called Glen's Retro Show. Just search Glen Planamento.
And everybody, not to forget, we're coming to the end of our contest giveaway for Tempest for the Atari 5200. We're having the deadline end on April the 30th. So you have up until April the 30th to put in your reason why the Atari 5200 console was the premier console of its day. You can send in your answer to the Atari 5200 podcast at gmail.com. We want to thank everybody for their submissions thus far, and please get your submissions in. We really enjoy reading them, and the winning submission will be read on the next episode.
Well, everyone, special thanks always to Bill Kendrick for showing up on our podcast and contributing. We really loved his company, and of course, he had some great input on Star Raiders. But we also want to say that we are part of the Throwback Network. Visit throwbacknetwork.net to learn more. And of course, we are a part of the Retro Junkies Network. Find us at theretrojunkies.com.
And that's a wrap, guys. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this very, very long episode, but we had to give Star Raiders its due. We hope we've done that, and we want to thank you all for listening.
Fight the
Good
Xylons.
night, everybody. And good night.
Okay, good night,
We'll talk-
everybody.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program are those of the hosts and persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of ColecoVision or Intellivision owners. The Atari 5200 podcast is not responsible if you should start liking the Atari 5200 console over its competition. At this time, the Atari 5200 podcast now concludes its podcast day and ceases recording. The Atari 5200 podcast is produced under the authority of Bob Benedetti and David Vucetic. Regular listening of this episode now continues on iTunes and other quality feeds.
Discover Atari. And discover how far you can go.
The dog bit you.
Oh, no.
Blue?
Yeah!
That poor dog isn't biting anybody.
Yes, he did!
What's today?
April Fool!
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Oh.
I have not read all 26 pages of these show notes, by the way.
Neither has anybody else. Don't worry about it.
Here we
Okay.
go.
Okay. We're off to outer space to protect our star base, to defend from the Xylon race. Our Star Raiders. Okay, that was terrible. Okay, let's just everybody say right now on a count of 3, our Star Raiders, okay?
Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Our Star Raiders. We suck! Okay.
Blame Skype. Let's move on.
Okay.
We tried.
We tried.
Maybe we could take an audio clip and put that in its place.
You know what? Let's go in the blooper reel. Next.
All right. Now what do we do?
Well, you're next, Bob.
It says right there. News. Marking the target. Okay.
Quick, guys, if you could, my wife just finished up dinner and everything.
Yeah.
Could you give me like 10 or 15-minute break? And
You got to eat?
You guys, I do have to eat.
Again with you and the food. You did this before another episode. Remember, Glen, you said the 5200 should be your sustenance.
Yeah, did any part of this about Space Spartans on the Intellivision?
No. Okay.
You are the last hope to fight back, defending the Xylons and to bring peace and freedom once more to the galaxy.
Sorry. You said defending the Xylons. Whose side are you on anyway?
I'm sorry, did I say defend?
Yeah.
I defeat the Xylons.
Double agent, knew it.
Well, let's try this again.
Speaking
You want to start at the top again?
I like this. He calls Bob a double agent. This guy's like a triple, quadruple agent. He's got like Intellivision and ColecoVision and every other frick-frack agents in his house.
Remember, deflection. Deflection.
I'm betraying myself now.
Can you imagine Bob is eating? He's not even here to read his own stuff. Don't tell me Bob just came back. I just saw him.
I'm just taking a quick break and everything, coming down and everything.
Okay, because you know why, Bob? We've gone through the whole thing and we're waiting for you.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Hold on, let me open this bottle of wine for my wife because she wants a glass, and I'll be right back.
Okay. Man, look at this guy. He's whining. He's dining.
Yeah. He's got the console. What does he got to care about her for?
He's living a life. You and me. You and me, we're sweating here. We're fumbling our words. We're trying to get through this thing while he's feeding himself again.
Sorry, my wife. We were also watching. I don't know if you're watching it as well, but the Oregon North Carolina game. It's a nail biter. Yeah.
Holy! What the heck? You're eating. You're drinking wine. You're watching sports.
Wow, Bob.
I'm doing.
Isn't this supposed to? Isn't this supposed to be your podcast?
My. Well, yes, but it's.
That dog. I got to tell you guys though. Know what he did to me this morning? He comes into my room and he goes, "Dad, I hit my leg, and it was all what I thought was all blood down his leg." I'm like, "Oh my God, what happened?" He goes, "I hit my leg." He went down, got ketchup, put ketchup all down his leg, and it was he's my son for sure. And then to make it even better, he left the ketchup bottle up and downstairs with ketchup all over the place and left a big mess. So,
and he thinks it's hilarious.
Nice. Yeah, he's a funny guy.
Okay, he tell him. Okay, Cole, you're going to be on the show. I hope you know that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to put you in a special section. It's at the end of the show.
Yes!